Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. I want to do just about 30 minutes, I guess. It's Sunday morning, and it's 5 o'clock. I get up very early, 2:30, or else I probably would not have made a video, but I had a lot of time, so I'm going to make one. And I just want to overview, this is kind of maybe going to be a little week in review type thing. And I had a hard time finding my chapter. It was a lot of the things you do, like little functions. You can't function with those little things. That's how you know, okay, this is, you're processing. So that's aspects of, I said, well, I'll make this video today. But I had yesterday, I tried to not do much, and I was going to limit on the videos to do a little bit more in-depth teaching. But I find it's beneficial to teach because it processes your mind. So it's good to speak. Now, I finished yesterday. I had Huey come by. I haven't seen him in a while, and a lot of the guys don't come to the house. They think, oh, John's going through one of his periods where he gets a little nuts. And I could see it on Huey's face because I was in the yard, and my wife said, oh, one of your friends is here. And then I kind of went out, and he had that look at the headlights. They don't know, you're going to go see John. I don't know. But it was good. I was glad. I gave him a cigarette, and he saw it. I'm very accept people when they come to the house. I'm not get mad or anything. So we just talked for a little while. He's trying to get an apartment, and it was a good little fellowship. I've had a lot of friends, even Huey's family. Many years they say, oh, he's worthless, and I've always responded and said, well, he's got some good qualities, and he gave me this look at this little shrimp. I don't know. See that shrimp? I collect stuff. I got things from some of my friends here. And a few years ago, he had that little shrimp. He found it on the Oso Bay. Many years of being homeless on the streets, struggling with addiction. And I had it hanging on my mirror of my vehicle a few years ago. And I said, I got it. I saved it, and everything. I keep things my friends give me. And then a couple years later, he asked me, he said, you still got it? I didn't see it on your mirror, John. They remember that. I said, I got it at the house. I saved it. The scripture talks about fishing and things of that nature. And so whenever I collect stuff, all those things I found, everything on there was given to me or I found it. Net, fish, I found it walking. Did a lot of walking these last few years. And then I save it. And I got things from New Jersey. I did the same. So I talked to Huey for a little while, and I said, man, it's Saturday, and I said, we'll go see your brother David. I'm ready to go. Any excuse for me to do something. But he said, no, I don't want to go see my brother. He lives on the other side of town. And so I said, okay. And we had a little fellowship. The other day, when I get up very early, sometimes I jump in the bathtub, and before I walk outside, I pray. This morning is pretty out. And I got in the tub, and I heard something fall. Plump. I said, what was that? And I felt like a fish. I said, John, you're nuts now. You got to watch the videos. So I felt like a fish. I said, what'd you do? I had nothing. I thought, well, it can't be a shark. And then I sat in the tub. I had the music on, Christian music. And something jumped on me, and I hit it. It was a lizard. I guess a lizard got in the bathroom, and because of the water. And my cats are always killing lizards around here in the yard and all. So I hit him, not knowing what it was, and then I realized he was in shock, and I felt bad. And then I picked him up, I put him out. So over a few weeks, when I would go in the bathroom, he'd be in different spots. And I tried to be nice to him, so he would oh, he's not going to hit me again. So I would move the shower curtain slowly, and I'd put a little water on them. And I told my kids, I said, I got a pet lizard. And I was in the yard the other day, and I saw a baby lizard, real small. And sure enough, I thought, oh, I should bring that baby and start a little lizard farm family in the bathroom. So, and then I thought, oh, maybe I'll put him in the yard so he can be out. I got a very nice yard. But then I thought, oh, but the cats might kill him, because that's what they do. I find dead lizards a lot. But the last few days, when I went in the bathroom, his new hiding spot was in the drain of the tub, because I don't have the little screen for the water, and I guess he can get right in the drain. I'd see him sticking his head out, and I'm like, oh, I can't. I didn't want to put the water on, but I did. I put the tub stopper. I said, maybe he'll go through. And then a few mornings, I noticed he'd be hiding in there. So then yesterday or the day before, when I got out of the tub and took the little tub stopper off, he was in the water. He came out of that drain. And I said, oh, I'm going to have to take you in the yard. So I picked him up and I put him by the pond. And so, if you love something, let it go. Life is a journey. And we're supposed to take risks. And it says in the scripture, get out of the city and dwell in the fields, even in Babylon. And there I will be with you. And there I will deliver you from the hand of the enemy. You know, I didn't even think of that verse. I was going to talk a little bit on Jeremiah, and it fits what... None of this is planned today. I was going to mention Jeremiah, a verse in Jeremiah chapter, because that's where I'm in my reading, chapter 43. I actually thought I might mention it, and that verse I just quoted deals with it. God said, I want you to get out of the city and dwell in the fields. I want you to go to Babylon, even to Babylon. In the book of Jeremiah, through Jeremiah the prophet, God was declaring that judgment was on its way. Jesus, I quoted Matthew 24 the other day. Jesus said, I've left that quote out. He said, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. And then it says, whoso readeth, let him understand. There's a debate. What does that mean? Whoso readeth, let him understand. A few years ago, I was reading verses in Daniel and Zechariah, some in Revelation. We might get to this one day, Revelation chapter 11, about two witnesses. The theme hit me differently. God was telling Daniel, in these prophecies, he was saying, there's going to come a time of trouble like you've never experienced before. Now, we relate this to the time of Jacob's trouble, which is dealing with the last video, 7 years of tribulation, and I gave you some interpretations. But as I read it, God, through these prophecies in Daniel, Zechariah, and all, God was also given a theme, and it said, I'm showing you something, Daniel. This is what's going to take place. There's going to be a lot of trouble, a lot of difficulty, like you've never experienced before. The people never experienced before since there was a nation. But at the end, it will be fulfilled. At the end, there will be justice. At the end, God will be vindicated. He will be vindicated through his people. The same theme in Revelation 11, which I didn't even read. Yesterday I read Revelation 10. But 11 is these two witnesses. They're persecuted. These are images also of the church, of the people of God. It says, and they were killed publicly, and their bodies were in the streets, meaning they wanted to make fun and say, oh, look at what happened. That's what that image is. It says, but after 3.5 days, the Spirit of God, I should have read this chapter, but the Spirit entered into them, they came upon their feet, and all that saw them were afraid. That through those that were being persecuted, trampled under, it was through them that they would begin speaking. And people would say, there's a verse about Jesus in Peter, but it's quoted from other places as well. Jesus himself quotes it from Psalms. In Psalms it says, the stone that the builders rejected has become the head of the corner. And this is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. And then the famous verse comes after that. This is the day that the Lord hath made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. What day? The day that the stone that the builders rejected, the crucifixion. Jesus said, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. His crucifixion, his death. And there's Christian songs about that. Lift Jesus higher, lift Jesus higher. It's talking about the crucifixion. So Peter quotes that in his epistle because Jesus quoted it from the psalm. And it said, that, the stone that the builders rejected, the same has become the head of the corner. The ones that were persecuted, the ones that things happened to, they then became the ones that were the head of the corner. The things that they were speaking, they were saying, was changing the day, was having the argument. We live in a day where a lot happens because of who gets to have their voice. I think we're going to have economic problems coming. I don't know if I'll even get to this Jeremiah thing, but the Jeremiah verse said, Jeremiah was the verse I just quoted a minute ago, get out of the city and dwell in the fields, even in Babylon. Jeremiah was saying to the people this, judgment's going to come. You have to be carried captive into Babylon. This is God's purpose. Because they could not accept that the way they perceived everything to be going well with them, that they violated so much of God's law and commands as a people, that it was of necessity that they would come under judgment. Revelation, it says, when the judgments of God were coming upon evil and wickedness, that still they didn't repent. There's a verse that says, let him that does evil do evil still. Let him that's bad stay. And I used to wonder about that. But it was saying, even the process of judgment, people turn their eyes from it. And in this case of Jeremiah, he's prophesying that this is chapter 43. And he says, God tells him because the people were not going to obey, meaning they were not going to submit and allow the judgment to take place. God was giving them a choice. It's going to happen, you can submit to it. And God tells Jeremiah, take these stones, these big rocks, and put them in the brick kiln, the thing that you make the stones and bricks with. And then he gives a prophecy. And it says, the Nebuchadnezzar, which is king of Babylon, his forces are going to come and take you. And he's going to, the armies of the north are coming. Judgment's coming from another authority figure, somewhere else. And those that are given over to death are going to die. Those for captivity are going to go into captivity. Those who sword to the sword. And I will kindle a fire in the houses of the gods of Egypt. He will burn them as a shepherd putteth on his garment, and he shall go forth from thence in peace. I read that last night. It's dealing with judgment. I underlined go forth. Talking about judgment. There was an officer killed in Texas yesterday. His name was Goforth. I read it. And I'm not giving you, I'm saying that was a wrong thing, obviously. And people can't understand. And I heard one of the commanders or captains, whatever authority he was, he said, this must stop. This, of course, we don't want killings. I posted a few videos yesterday. Just saw them real quick when I was checking up on the news. I don't go online every day. And if I get online to post a Facebook video, I'll just look real quick at the news. Being I'm on. I like to not be on Facebook. I don't read comments. I don't go through any of that. But the video was a black guy. It was a new video. It wasn't, he didn't get beat up or nothing, but he was being trailed. And he had an expensive car without estate plates, but he was a legitimate black guy. But he's going to visit his mom in another state. Sure enough, this cop was following him for a couple miles, tailing him, following him, just waiting for any excuse to pull him over. I posted the video. It was on Huffington Post. So finally, the cop pulls him over. He had an excuse. He turned into his mom's driveway, and he used his blinker, but he didn't use it 100 yards before the thing, which is a violation of the law, and then pulled up. Now, when you're instigating stuff like that, on the video, the black guy even said, look, if all that's happened this last year and all this disruption between cops and black people, and he says, and then you're tailing me for 2 miles. And he says, I got my phone on, I got my camera on. And he said, and then he got the ID. I want IDs of everybody in the vehicle. Why pursue something like that? We had a state senator, just a few years ago, and he kept driving through Robstown, where I told you, all they do is tail you, look for reason. The cops there get mad if you do not speed, because they got a speed zone, and they've done this to me. And I set my thing that I'm not going to go over 45 because of a construction. They get mad, they nonstop, and they kept pulling the senator over. And he finally did something. They didn't know he was a senator, but they were just looking for, they basically profiled that vehicle. Oh, it's an expensive vehicle, and I think it was a Hispanic senator. And he finally, I remember it came out in the paper, he said, these guys can't keep their hands off of me. They wanted to just... Now, in these cases, and the reason I posted them is, why did that Officer Goforth get shot in Texas? I'm not sure why. Obviously, he was targeted by somebody else. But whether that officer maybe did something to that man or not, this is why harassment and all these things, there's laws against it, because you begin to identify anybody in a uniform. Anybody, you begin to see them all. If there is wrongdoing, criminal activity by 1 or 10 or 20 of them, and you have a history of, like that senator driving through Robstown every time, we're going to stop him, we're going to get our hands on this guy. You begin viewing all of them through that paradigm. So, obviously, we don't justify killing, shooting, any of these things. But that's why those things need to be dealt with when they're brought to the attention of authorities. And the normal thing is, what I understand is the authorities want to cover it up at the expense of the citizenry. Now, the stocks, the Dow, the judgment that Jeremiah was prophesying that was going to come. They didn't want to listen. I think that what we've seen this last week, this week in review, I think it's nothing. I think we're going to hit a major, major economic global crash. And it's not from any secret information I have. China is going to crash further than they are. European markets, economies, none of that has recovered. None of it. And we had some little good numbers. One of the funniest, saddest manipulation of numbers we do in our country to settle people is what's called the consumer confidence. They actually, one of the big things on is everything going to go good or not, is not how much you made, whether or not you lost your job, whether or not you lost, it's how do the consumers feel. That's it. And how they feel is often not reported correctly because they eliminate people from that calculation for their own benefit. And so the latest consumer confidence, in the midst of losing a few $1 trillion in the market and all this, the later was everybody's upbeat about the economy. You say, well, John, certainly they can't lie about that number. Why would they not be able to lie about that number? Why would they not be able to manipulate that number? Well, because those anonymous people taking these, overall, we're in a global change. And the way that the world economies try to deal with what's happening now is through what's called monetary policy. And central banks, including the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States, it's been in this mode of low interest rates, historic lows for a very long time, which means that puts a lot of fake money of printing. It's not even printed, it's just numbers on a computer screen for banks, and they say add a few zeros to your accounts. That's how that's done. What a card game this is. And they said maybe this will help grow maybe it'll help put money into the economy, but it didn't. What it did was it falsely inflated the market. That money, those trillions and trillions that we printed, I think, or just added, I think it was about 4 trillion these last few years. All it did was falsely inflate what people invest in. And so the stock market was not really representing you buying shares of a company that's evaluated at a certain thing. It was just money flowing into that system. And it's at 16 something now, and I think it's going to crash before. I think we're not going to leave this year before the end of the year, we're going to have a global, very bad problem. And European markets, banks did the same thing. They call it quantitative easing. That's the technical name, QE, which means just pump money in. And that money was not really impacting a real economy. It was that financial paper economy, which is kind of a fake thing. And so that's what you're having. And I think that we're like the people that Jeremiah was prophesying to. And we just don't want to face that. John, can you give us some advice? People have asked me, I said, if I had cash in the market or in a bank, financial advisors have told people, you'll hear this on financial shows and all, go to cash, go to cash. When they say that, they're not saying actually get your cash. They're saying move it out of risky instruments and put it in other things. I think if I had $100,000, I would take at least half of that money out. And people say, oh, and put it somewhere. Physically put it somewhere. Some people put it in safe deposit boxes. And I would say physically find a place where you could put it, where it would be safe. That way, and people during the Depression, after they went through Depression, lost everything, a lot of people hid money in mattresses and all. And they said, well, you can't do that. The main reason people say you can't do that is because, well, you need to get interest. Inflation will eat you up. If there's no interest on your money, and there's a possibility that banks also that are not in great financial health, just recently in Greece, this last few months, there were limits on ATM machines and things of that nature. European countries actually rated one of the solutions, I forget it was France or Greece, but one of them these last few years, when they hit economic crisis, they considered that a state of emergency, and they actually rated the accounts of investors. And it was considered like, a martial law concept. We're in an emergency, we need money, and there are certain investors, all your money in the banks, we're going to take so much of it. That was done. So my advice is if people had a lot of money, and you have it in the stocks, if you have control of it, and you had it in a bank, I would take a portion of that cash out and just put it somewhere. Put it where it's not going to get burned down if you have a fire. Find a place somewhere. Put it somewhere. That's how bad I think it can get. And you say, well, I have to leave it in the system because inflation will eat me up. Look, you're getting no interest on that. And inflation right now is not a problem. So I would just simply say, I would do that. That would be my advice. We're not in that mode anymore of ride it out. We're past that mode of ride it out. Some people rode it out and lost everything. Okay, I want to make a few notes. Let's see, I wrote a few things down. I can't really make out what I wrote here. That one little scripture Jesus said when he was talking about judgment, time of trouble, time of difficulty. And I gave you a little context, okay, in that last video. That's what I wanted to give you. But practically, when we read through Revelation, when we read through, say, I got Michael the Archangel, I got another angel with a censer in his hand. They represent things to me, things that we too function in. And what you're seeing in these prophecies is people, one of the chapter I read yesterday in Revelation, we also see some of this in the Old Testament prophets. But it says, take the book, eat it, it'll be sweet in your mouth and bitter in your belly. When God gave jobs for prophets, in the last verse, I think chapter 10 says, you will prophesy again before many nations and places. In these prophecies of Daniel, it says, these things are going to happen, but no man will stand with you in this except Michael the Archangel. I like that imagery. We're going to see this again. Actually true. Angels are real, okay? But we see Michael the Archangel again in Revelation, conquering. And it says, you will see certain things. But no, if God calls you to a certain function in your life, whatever that function is, it's your responsibility to fulfill that function. Many years ago, I wrote this. Many years. It's just a little mission statement of Corpus Christi Outreach Ministries. Now I saved that. I used to have that at the firehouse. And at that time, I wrote that 20-something years ago. It's got verses on it. I saved that little paper. But you couldn't see it too clearly, but it shows, like from Corpus Christi, we were going to expand the ministry. And at that time, I was thinking of doing like Victory Outreach Ministries, was sort of like little halfway houses, rehabs for drug addicts. That was the original idea. And I had the KCTA radio program written on there. That would be the way we would broadcast out. I used to run ads in the newspaper. Now, that was the first concept of, okay, this is sort of the mission statement I felt God had for us. And I did for many years radio and work with street guys. Then I had a time of trouble like no man had before there was a nation. And I understood in the beginning there would be certain things that had to take place, but no man would stand with you. Me talking about all these issues on the YouTube and all, and some of my friends on Facebook, a lot of those guys are afraid to be around me. Because you make yourself a target when you discuss those issues. I fully recognize that. And some of the things that were told to Daniel and all were, no one's going to stand with you in this. You decide, if I've called you to do a certain thing, to speak on a certain thing, you speak that thing. You know, they threw Jeremiah in a prison. These guys were being persecuted. History tells us Isaiah was cut in half, the prophet. So you have a calling, and you're going to have to fulfill it. And there might be a time of trouble. There's a verse I have on the fence, and I just read it in Scripture the other day, but I got it. It's by memory. It says, the street will be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. So that original idea of ministry that I have there on the wall, and all of it, actually that's what we're fulfilling now. That is, we are broadcasting out of Corpus Christi, but it's through different means now. YouTube, we're still doing it, but it was in a different way. And it says, write the vision and make it plain upon tables or pads or tablets, because the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak, or it will come to pass. It will not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it will surely come. And that one verse from the angel in chapter 10 of Revelation, it says, time will be no longer. Talks about a certain, all of those are significant, but it talks about the seven trumpets, the seven angels, when they begin to sound, and one of them says, time will be no longer. And I used to always read that, and I have a book on Einstein and relativity and time, and I understand there'll be a time where time is no longer. But then I saw it different yesterday, because he said to Daniel and the other prophets that I'm calling you to do certain things. It's going to be a period that takes place, but at the end it comes to pass. And when I read that yesterday, time will be no longer, I read it in this way. Time's up. Time's up. Or now is the fulfillment. There's a judgment on Babylon, wicked systems, wicked things, in the book of Revelation. It says, in 1 hour her judgment has come. So God's got purposes in your life. He's going to fulfill those things. It might come, there's a verse in Hebrews that says, He taketh away the first, that He might establish the second. It's talking about the new covenant. But I apply that as well as in your life. You might have had ideas or plans or things, but God can take that away. It says, because the weakness and the unprofitableness of it, and then establish something new. Some of my friends right now, through the cycles of recovery, getting their lives in order, then they got back hooked up into the same cycle again. That cycle will continue to repeat until it's broken. You know, Pops told me the other day, and I don't answer my phone a lot, but Pops told me the other day, I notice I get missed calls from Pops, and he said, John, I guess he dropped his sponsor in AA, and he said, I told one of the guys, you're my sponsor, that I'm his sponsor. And I said, well, Pops, I said, okay, that's fine, but I'm not good with that because you're supposed to contact them every day and all, and I'm not good with answering the phone. But a lot of the progression of things that we're seeing and doing, I think God also had a role for me to be a witness, an example of someone who's sober. I started, when I realized I read up on, depression and how to combat actual physical things. I understand there are chemical things. And I remember I said, I need some lithium in my system. And I forgot mustard. I read online, mustard's got a lot of lithium, and I just forgot to take the certain foods or whatever. So the last few days, everything I'm eating, mustard's on everything. Lincoln, when he led our country at a time of great problems, Civil War, if you look at the pictures of Lincoln, that guy was a manic depressive, no doubt about it. And I wonder if they treated somebody that was going through struggles, if he could have really done what he was supposed to do. When I just finished reading the Gospel of John, Jesus talking about tough things, his man as well. But yet, we are designed, in a sense, to be sort of revolutionaries, crusaders, to have purpose. And if you took all those men, the disciples, Jesus being crucified, raised from the dead, but then leaving them, and then them beginning, there was no time. We call Paul, there's a term for the Apostle Paul, it's called a task theologian. A lot of the books and things I read on theology and history, I read a little bit yesterday, Paul Tillich and Karl Barth and stuff. But these men were speaking, good men, but they were in ivory towers in a sense, just communicating what they could learn. Task theologian, which we refer to the Apostle Paul, he said, if I fought, risked my life with beasts at Ephesus, beaten, he gives a whole list of things that happened to him. He was living on the run. He was living in danger, physical violence, problems, and he was penning those letters, writing the New Testament. Some were written from prison. We call them the prison epistles. So it was out of that life, that brokenness, and the scriptures that say God will cleave the rock in two, and water flows out, which is a sign of Christ, the rock being pierced on the cross, Jesus himself. But in your life and my life, we're not designed. You would have took all those apostles and all those guys and Paul and others and said, oh, we got a bunch of programs for you to make you feel better, Paul, about all that's happened and all that's suffering. And we're going to put you on, we're going to level you out. Maybe we'll give you some stuff with chemical imbalances and all. Live with a purpose, live with a destiny. Move forward. Then you'll do well. If you settle in, David's friend Jude, I like it. I think some people have died that I'm not even aware of. I'm not saying Jude did, but I didn't know Jude very well, but my friend David always talks highly of Jude. And I remember when I was getting ready to leave Texas and all, I'd run into Jude in and out. He's very big in AA, Jude, older man. But he would always use the thing. He'd say, It's hard to hit a moving target. And I like that. I remember that. It's hard to hit a moving target. And in the sense, God has told us, you have a purpose in your life. Fulfill that purpose. And when you have things happening and you're dealing with mental, physical, all types of issues, move forward. Fulfill the purpose. Because if you get caught up, my friend Bear I texted him yesterday. I said, hey, or the day before, I said, I might show up in the area. I'm in the valley at the doctor, which was okay. A lot of my friends are spending a lot of time with doctors, getting checked, getting checked. What about this? What if I have this? What if... God's going to take care of you. Fulfill your destiny. You have a certain limited time. You fulfill that. And it's not about just self-fulfillment, creature comforts. It's about fulfilling what God's put in you. A life lived well. Give your life away. That's what people are up now, so I guess I'm going to end my video. That's it for today, and I'll post this later. God bless.